Amazing. Um, well, hello everyone. My name is Elisa Stampf. I'm CEO and co-founder of Insure Quality, and today we're going to talk a little bit about cultural components and how to recognize them. So essentially, when you're in the workplace, when you're anywhere, how can you recognize the impact that culture has on your life and the lives of the people around you? Let's go to the next slide. So obviously I look a little bit different than this picture. It was taken about a year ago. My hair has grown since then, but this is me. And this is a little bit of my background in the industry of insurance to give you that background. I spent 6 years as a commercial underwriter, 4 years as a marketing rep. I'm a licensed agent still. And since then, I've been working on the nonprofit side with leadership and culture. The pieces that you see at the bottom there are my insurance designations. For some people, they know what that means. For others, it's just another class that I can take, more alphabet soup than I could add to my name. But I just want to show you, I did not just start an insurance nonprofit just to start an insurance nonprofit. I've worked in the industry, I've spent time here, and insurance and what I'm doing is truly a passion of mine. So it's an honor to come back to Kelly, to talk to all of you, to share my experiences, and to help in any way that I can. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so tonight we're going to spend some time talking about culture, figuring out what it is, defining it, truly trying to understand it, and then taking all of that information and trying to make change with it. What I found, and what many of you may have seen or still see, is that we're kind of stuck in this loop of talking about it, discussing it, learning about it, and then nothing really changes. Well, we'd like to change that. So come with me on this journey. We're going to try to work together to figure some of these things out. I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm going to give you some statistics, but really what this is about is who you are, your perspective, and using that to understand the world around you. So let's get started. We're going to head to the next slide. Sam, thank you so much for leading the PowerPoint for me. I super appreciate it. So let's define culture. Culture is a collective habit that we reinforce daily. This is not a definition that you'll find in Webster or any of those. This is the Insure Quality definition. And the reason we've chosen this definition is because it doesn't put the onus on multiple types of people or different groups. It doesn't single anybody out. Culture is something that we're experiencing and doing every day, whether we recognize it or not. And that's important to note because sometimes we have a dominant culture affecting other cultures and the dominant culture isn't recognized. So we really want to bring everybody to this moment of understanding that what you're doing, whether you're recognizing it or not, is part of the culture that you are contributing to. Everybody has a say. So let's dig into it a little bit more, and we're going to do a visualization exercise. So this is where I'm going to need some participation. Let's go to the next slide. And I've put a couple pictures up here to help you think about things from this lens. So we're going to start and we're going to zoom out and we're going to go macro first. So looking at these pictures, we've got a ton of different landscapes. We've got mountains and it looks a little colder. We've got a little cityscape that maybe looks European, and then we've got the desert. But what I want you to do, and you can shut off your cameras, close your eyes, whatever you want to do to make yourself feel more comfortable as you think about this while I talk to you. We're going to imagine a time that you have traveled to a place that is not your town where you've grown up. You don't have to go to an international place if you don't want to. It could be a different state, it could be a different county, but somewhere where you do not live and work actively. So go there in your mind with me and think about every piece of it, because again, culture is something that's happening no matter what you're doing. So imagine you're waking up in this place. Is the temperature different? Does it smell different? When you get out of bed and you walk outside, are people wearing different clothes than what you're used to seeing? What about breakfast? Is that defined differently? Does it have different foods? Put yourself back in that moment and think about what's around you. Because when you are out of your element, when you are out of where you are at home, that's when you are picking up on and noticing culture more. Okay, does everybody have that visual? Amazing. I'm going to ask for some participation here. It's minimal though, and you can stay off camera. Do not worry about it. So, where did people go? Sam and I were talking about our mini study abroad experiences, and I know she's going to be going to Italy in a couple weeks. I went to Vietnam when I went to mine, so I tend to visualize that one because that one was very different for me. Where did anybody go? You want to drop it in the chat? We can talk about it. Ooh, Malta. That's a cool place. Haven't been to Malta. Anybody else go somewhere different? Amazing. Okay. Italy made a trip in there. Very cool. So people went places. How different was it? And you don't have to answer that. How different was it? Think about that. We're going to move to the next slide and we're going to zoom in a little bit more when we do. Thanks for the participation, team. Appreciate it. Okay. So now we're going to zoom in. We're going to talk about work. Not everybody's favorite topic, but something that we all experience in some way, shape, or form. So I've got 3 different office styles. We've got a work from home here in the middle. We've got an upscale industrial type on the far right. And then on the left, that cubicle corporate environment. Now, I want you to think about, we're going to do another visualization. And I want you to think about your first day of work at whatever company. It could be the company that you're at now. It could be the first company that you ever worked at. But I want you to think about the first day specifically, because that is when you are experiencing the culture of that office most vividly. Okay, so now that you've picked your company, you've picked your role, you've picked your first day, let's go there. Think about when you got up. Was it a different time than you were used to getting up? Did you have to alter your schedule to make this work? What about what you ate to prepare? What did you wear on your first day? Did you go a little, excuse me, did you go a little more formal? Did you dress it down? Did you know about it before you got to the office? Were you panicking? What about in the office? Did people greet you when you walked in? Was somebody waiting for you? Was there a break room with coffee? Did they have snacks? Did somebody take you out to lunch? Did you fend for yourself? Did you have to stay late because maybe they didn't get you a badge? Or maybe they sent you home early because they were like, hey, it's your first day, syllabus day. That's great. All right, come back to me for a second. I'm not going to ask any questions about this one. I'm not going to ask where you work. But were you able to pick up on the little things? How people interacted with each other? Maybe they used one door specifically, even though there were 3, and everybody just uses the same door. This is all part of that culture. This is all part of working in a specific environment. And the reason that we're doing this is because as leaders, sometimes we forget to notice the little things. We're zoomed out, we're taking a broad view of what the work environment is. And sometimes it's the little things that make or break the culture. So let's move ahead to the next slide. Keeping this in mind, I want you to keep that first day really fresh for you because we're going to do something together here with this list. So at IE, we have a culture rater. We wanted an award for it while this tech was still in beta. It's a culture survey. It's 50 questions, and it's designed for people within the insurance industry to be able to take this questionnaire and to have this questionnaire tell them how the culture of their company feels. Not whether or not they like it, not if they've had a good time or they like the CEO or their boss, but how it feels to work there. And these are the components that we measure. We've talked to psychologists, therapists, HR professionals, and by far, these are the 7 that float to the top. And again, these aren't a Webster Dictionary definition version. These are the shorthand. This is our association with these words. And I will tell you, having looked at a lot of the data, the 2 that companies tend to score lowest on are inclusion and integrity. You can do with that what you will. But what I would love for you to do right now is, if you have a pen and paper, or if you want to just think about this in your mind's eye, that's fine too. But pick a couple of these components of culture that really resonate with you. I'll tell you, for me, some that I really love. I love accountability. I love support. That's one that a lot of folks miss, because support means a lot more than just like, oh, you're doing a great job. It means having what you need to do the job. So pick a couple, 2 to 4, and write them down. And once you have that, we're going to move to the next slide, and we're going to do a little activity together. And this is going to help put you in that place of being a leader, investigating your culture, and understanding what's next. All right, let's move to the next slide. We're going to do this together. So I'm going to give you an example of something that I did. So I want you to use that visualization that we just did on your first day of work. And write with those 3 to 4, 2 to 4 different components of culture that you've written down. Start to put in those little moments into those categories. So I've given you an example here that you can use. As you can see, I chose accountability, communication, support, and transparency. And here's a couple of things that floated to the top for me when I was thinking about some of the previous places that I worked at. So if you notice, I've got apology email in both accountability and communication. You can have things fit in more than one category. In fact, I think it makes sense that they fit in more than one. But there was a company that I worked at that sent out an apology email. And I thought that was incredible, because I don't often see corporate environments apologize. So that was something that I considered positive, and I put it under accountability and communication. This company also blamed sales for not being able to move the needle forward, not being able to hit the goals. But that goes back to support. Do they have the support to do the job? Do they have the tools to do it? Now, I'm not going to ask you what you've put in categories, but I'm curious, which components of culture did people choose? What floated up to the top for you? What are you thinking about when you think about a company culture? Put it in the chat for me if you can. Integrity. I love that you said that one, Jenny, because 70%, I think, is the statistic of companies use integrity as a value, a company value. This is one of the most commonly selected, and I think one of the least known. Anybody else have something different than integrity? Oh, okay. Thanks, Paul. Recognition, support, integrity, inclusion. Okay. So you can see not everybody is choosing the same ones. I want to be clear on that, because as a company, you don't have to get 100% in every category. What matters to you is going to matter something differently to somebody else. The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to create a culture that supports people, and then find the people that really want to be a part of that culture. Awesome. Thank you for participating and helping me with that. Let's move to the next slide. Let's keep this going. So now we've talked about what culture is. We've kind of dove through it together, understood it a little bit, defined it. But I want to put some numbers and some interesting information in front of you, because again, I'm talking to a group of leaders. I'm talking to potentially entrepreneurs or current entrepreneurs. And I want to show you why, if you don't necessarily want to follow the line of talk right now with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, why it matters, why it's important, not just from the cultural standpoint, but also from the business case, which I don't like to have to do, but here we are. It is important. It is now a part of your business. So I've pulled a couple of major quotes from Deloitte and Harvard Business Review, and I think both of these really hit home. When you're hiring and recruiting folks, you're going to be looking at more than people that are your age, people that are from your perspective. And specifically, the younger generations care deeply about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Both of these quotes are from recent reports. Deloitte talks specifically about diversity mattering to Gen Z. In fact, Gen Z is the most diverse generation in our country's history. So this does matter because it's your workforce, but it also matters because people are human and we care about perspective, and perspective breeds innovation. Harvard Business Review, I really love this one. And I'll just read it for you if I may. While 60% of HR leaders say employees are respected at work, only 44% of employees feel respected. I really want to emphasize the word feel here, because it doesn't matter if you're doing all of the things, if you're going through all the motions, if you have all the processes in place and you're checking every box. It matters what somebody feels. In the questionnaire that we've built on Phoenix, we ensure that we use the word feel a ton. Here's the thing. Humans are emotional. You cannot consider an outcome purely logically because humans are not purely logical. So I want you to think about that when you're thinking about your workforce. How do they feel? Let's move on. We'll go to the next slide. I'm really excited to show this to you. You're only the second group of people that I've showed this to. We've only been in operation for a little under 2 years, but we've been running our survey almost the entire time. The survey actually is hitting its year mark this year. And so I have enough data to show you that we're starting to see trends. And so what I want to do is put this in front of you. Now, most of this is coming through from insurance, but I do think it's applicable. Oh, I've got a question. I'm going to pause for a second. If I'm a manager, how do I convey that I really care and I'm not just towing the corporate DEI line? That's a phenomenal question. Here's the thing. You cannot control how people feel, and you can't make them feel a specific way about you. I think we get caught up, especially in the society, trying to get immediate outcomes. And so there's this like sense of, well, how do I make them know that I'm about this? When the reality is it takes much longer than just saying, hey, we're going to have an event. I'm your new DEI champion, which is not a fun answer to hear. It was not a fun answer for me as I was walking on my journey, doing what I'm doing and running this company, because I can't prove to everybody that I'm about it, at least not in 1 year. I have to keep showing up and I have to keep doing the work. And it's not a sexy answer, but it's the answer that I think makes the most sense. If you're looking for a way to make an immediate impact and an immediate connection, what I would tell you is it's about this, not this. So it's about your ears, not your brain. Let me talk about that for a second. Most of the time, your employees will tell you exactly what they want. They'll tell you exactly how they're feeling, and they'll tell you exactly what they need to thrive. They stop talking when they don't feel that you're listening. And this is true in sales too. So if any of you have a sales background, this was something that I was brought up in. People will tell you exactly how they feel about something. For instance, the first time I was in sales, I was in banking. And the first customer that sat at my desk goes, I hate my old bank. They don't let me deposit overnight. I can't get off work early enough to make a deposit. And so I'm always behind, and then I get overdraft fees. That was how the conversation opened. So all of a sudden, I have all of this information. I know they don't like their bank because they can't make deposits at night. They typically get overdraft fees. They don't like that, and they need some better communication. They have given me all the tools that I need to solve their problem for them. And employees are the same way. What we tend to run into, though, is the corporate talk versus the reality. That's not something I can solve for you overnight, but I would say the best way that you can make change, and I know this is a long answer, but thank you for sticking with me, is by listening, opening the door, allowing people to talk to you, and then showing them that you're about it. Even if you can't make the change, show them the results of what you tried to do. That will go a very long way. If anybody has any questions at any time, I'm happy to answer them. So thanks for putting that in the chat. Of course, of course. So let's get into the results from Phoenix. These were really, really cool to see because some of these things I think we could assume were one way, but the data we were getting was confirming a lot or showing us a different perspective that we didn't see. So there's a couple of points here I really want to emphasize that I think are really neat. The first is that team culture is different from organizational culture, which may seem obvious, but the line here was very clear. You can have an incredible team working at a company that no one likes, and they're happy to stay because they love their team. They love their manager, they love their coworkers, and they love the work that they're doing. The reverse of that can also be true, where you have an amazing organization and one or two people are ruining an entire team because of their attitude or because of the way that they're treating others. All of this can be true. So you can have a corporate culture that's fantastic, but if you have a little bit of a bad apple situation, that can be something to pay attention to. 1 in 10 survey respondents report not having or knowing about an incident reporting process at work. That is terrifying to me, especially in this day and age. The amount of harassment that happens, the amount of incidents that happen, generally speaking. The reason I want to call this out, especially for those of you that are looking to become entrepreneurs, you don't have to be a large company to have an incident reporting process. I'll give you an example. We're a small nonprofit. We've got a staff of 6. So not exactly needing an HR department just yet. There's a couple of ways that we could do this. One, we could hire an outside HR person. We're not there yet. The other, though, is that we got a little creative. So we have a board of directors, and knowing that most of the time when somebody has an incident to report, it's typically because of management. We didn't want to be the barrier if somebody had a problem with myself or my co-founder. So what we did is we said, okay, the incident reporting process for us is if you don't have a problem with Kylie or I and you want to come to us, come to us. If not, go to our board leadership. They all have the information for our board leaders. They all have the phone numbers, the email addresses, and they can submit something through them. And then the board leadership can come directly to us and help us deal with the situation. Is it perfect? No, but our entire team knows about it. So make sure that this is something that your team knows. This third point was something that I thought was incredible. Company size does not necessarily correspond to belonging. I think sometimes it's easy to go, well, that's a small company, so everybody there must feel like they belong. Or that's a huge company. There's no way that they could feel like they're a part of this company in a sea of 50,000 people. But the data doesn't show us that at all. And it goes back to that team culture is different from organizational culture. Sometimes it just makes sense. Sometimes you can belong because you feel a part of the work that you're doing. You're getting communicated to, you're being supported, the company is transparent. If that's all you need, then you belong. And then the last bit, and something that I think is incredibly important in this day and age, is over 10% of respondents reported retaliation, not harassment. This is retaliation after the fact. So the fear of this is very, very high. You don't need to do anything with this. I'm hoping that in a year or two, I'll have even more information and I can come back and tell you about it. But I thought that was very interesting. All right, we'll go to the next slide. And I just have one more bit to leave you with before we start to move on to the end. This was an incredible statistic. We actually learned this from a speaker that came to our community in February. She talks about psychological safety. She's in the insurance industry. And she found this report by Mercer that was conducted just last year. They surveyed 2,600 HR and risk professionals, and 87% of those 2,600 risk professionals said that health and safety is a serious threat to business. That includes mental health, that includes burnout, that includes DEI and B. This is something that matters deeply to people. And after having gone through a global pandemic with a lot of folks, having your entire lives turned around, complete changes in your structure, your home life, your schedule, this is the topic that folks are talking about. I think I've convinced you. I certainly hope I have. So let's move on to the next slide and we'll dig in a little bit deeper in a different way. Okay, so we now know what culture is. We now know why we need it, why we need to emphasize it. So how do we go from the knowing to the doing? How do we create change? I've got 3 stories here for you. And I'm going to speak candidly for a second. So I'm an entrepreneur. I didn't intend to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I didn't attend any of the entrepreneur classes. I wasn't involved with the groups. I was like, for sure, corporate life is for me. And then I started my journey. So if any of you are feeling the same way, just know it's still possible. The reason I bring that up is because entrepreneurship isn't always glamorous. Sometimes you're working multiple jobs. And that's true of me right now. I'm working multiple jobs to make sure that I can pay my bills and also do the work that I really super care about. One of the jobs I do right now is walking dogs. And walking dogs, I have a lot of time to think, but it's also given me a lot of interesting ways to tell stories and to notice how people interact with somebody that is a CEO versus somebody that's a dog walker. But I've got these 3 stories for you here, and I hope that it resonates within you on ways that you can make change and the ways that you can create impact. So I'm going to start with the crosswalk that has the word action right above it. Now, I live in the city of Chicago, and I know there's a ton of Kellys here in Chicago. So many of you may know the street LaSalle. It's a very large street, runs north to south. It's 2 lanes on either side. So I always have to walk across this crosswalk, both sides of the street, in order to get to one of my clients. And I know that pedestrians have the right of way, but unfortunately, someone didn't tell Chicagoans because they don't like to stop at crosswalks when you're standing there waiting. However, what I've noticed when I get to this crosswalk every day is that many times cars will zoom past and they will just like wait for the break in traffic and they're like, oh, well, I'm the last car in the bunch. She can just wait for me and then she can walk the street. However, every once in a while, there's a brave soul that in the middle of a pack of cars stops for me. And sometimes the cars next to them do not stop. Sometimes they'll zoom past, but I will tell you what, 100% of the time, if the car that stopped stays stopped, all of the cars around them stop too. It's human behavior. We follow the leader. We pay attention to each other. Sometimes the most difficult thing you can do is stop an entire lane of traffic. Stop an entire meeting after somebody says something that they maybe shouldn't have said. But sometimes all it takes is one person doing something and standing their ground to get everybody else to join in. Let's move to the next one. Representation. Now, this word has been thrown around a lot, and it typically has to do with visibility. But I want to talk about representation in ways that we don't necessarily see, because representation means more than just how you look and who you are. It's your perspective, your state of being, how you connect to other people. We're going to be more candid. I have very tiny ears, which is a very odd fact, but now you know it about me. I have small ears and even my AirPods don't fit. In fact, my left ear pushes every single AirPod that I put in it out, just boom, gone, which is why I typically only wear one. And I was complaining to my sister about this while I was walking dogs, and she goes, I think I can solve this for you. So she goes to Google, does some research, finds out that there's a whole list of the top 10 headphones that you can buy that are for small ears, which automatically makes me feel better because I am not the only person in the world that has tiny ears. So I'm in my elevator, I'm heading down, going out to walk dogs. And this woman, who I assume lives in my building, I've never seen her before. She walks into my elevator and her face lit up from the inside. And she goes, are those, insert name of headphones here, are those these headphones? I said, they are. I have really tiny ears, so my sister found them for me. And she goes, oh my gosh, I have tiny ears too. And I only wear one headbud because it fits just in one ear. And I said, oh my gosh, me too. And we had this incredible 2-minute conversation on an elevator ride about tiny ears. I have no idea what her name is, but I can tell you that when she walked off the elevator, she walked off completely different than when she walked in. Because for the first time, in what I would assume would be a very, very long time, she didn't feel very alone or wrong for being who she was, for just existing the way that she had no choice of existing. Tiny ears. And it's incredible what representation can do when it's just a little piece, just like that. And then the last one I want to talk to you about is improvement. How many of you have moved or pushed a stroller or pulled a suitcase, and thank goodness you get to that little curb cut and you're able to roll across it? It makes your life better, right? Maybe you're pushing a media cart. Maybe I'm really dating myself now. Remember the media carts with the giant old television sets? Maybe you're pushing one of those. Maybe you're delivering something. Those are a phenomenal piece of our society because they don't just help us, they help disabled people, they help parents, they help people in walkers. It's great, but they did not always exist. In fact, up until the 60s and 70s, a lot of people fought about them. We didn't have curb cuts at all. And it was typically the disabled community fighting for them, saying, hey, we would really like to be able to wheel our wheelchair up onto the sidewalk. And municipalities fought this very hard. It's a cost. It's only affecting a small portion of the population. Why would we do this? 1945 was the first time somebody really started to take an active stance. It was a disabled military veteran. And he's like, no, we got to make change. And through multiple decades of advocacy, what ended up happening was vandalism. They walked around with sledgehammers and asphalt, and they started to make curb cuts. Activism, advocacy isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's really difficult, especially for people in power, because they've decided that something, a change, a cost, only helps or benefits a small subset of society. However, I started this story with, if you've ever traveled, if you're a parent and you have a stroller, if you've moved and you've put anything on that sidewalk, you've benefited from the advocacy and activism of disabled people. So I want you to think about, especially when you're a leader, those little things that you think only impact a small group within your organization or within society. Chances are something that benefits some of us benefits all of us. Let's move to the next slide. Now, I know not all of you are in insurance, but I want to leave this in as a reminder that every industry, even if it doesn't feel inclusive, has building blocks that can make it that way. The adage that we use in insurance, especially when we talk about DEI and B, is that insurance is pale, male, and stale. When I talk to you about an insurance agent, you probably have a pretty strong visual of what it is. And the average insurance agent is a cisgender, heterosexual, 65-year-old white man. That's just what we envision. But insurance has the building blocks to be inclusive. I don't know if you know this, but you don't have to have a specific degree to be in insurance. You don't actually have to have a degree to be in insurance. There's degrees out there, but I know people with history degrees, art degrees, anthropology degrees, English degrees. Anybody can come to insurance and learn it. Whatever your skill set, you can be in insurance. Think about marketing or all of the little pieces that run a business. We need all of those folks as well. And I love the multiple lifestyles piece. This is not something that people talk about very often, but it is true what they say. A lot of insurance agents play golf during the summer, but it's also great for parents. Think about when you have kids that are off school, your downtime is when their downtime is. So insurance, on the face of it and looking at it demographically, doesn't look like an inclusive place. However, it has the building blocks to be it. And whatever industry you're in has those too. Sometimes it takes finding them and starting to put those down as your foundation so that you can build on top of them. Let's move to the next slide. We're nearly done, folks, don't worry. And then I'll stick around for questions and then we can chat a little bit more. Well, I would not be a good CEO or co-founder if I didn't talk a little bit about IE and Insure Equality and what we do. So everything that we do falls into three buckets: accountability, community, or transparency. I've talked to you a little bit about Phoenix. That's our online culture rater. We're going to have a certification that pairs with that coming out later this year. We also allow people to tell stories. We have a pledge that folks can sign, but something that I'm incredibly excited about and proud of is that we're hosting our inaugural summit on September 15th here in Chicago. We also have student pricing hint, hint. So if you want to come, please, please come. We're going to have industry leaders and folks from every industry background talking about things that you don't often get to talk about at a work conference, like intersectionality, trans rights, parenting, taboo topics at work like sex, religion, and politics. So please join us. And if you can't, please pass it along. But I'm very, very excited about it. And I hope that you can come. It is not insurance focused. We're going to have a couple of things in there, but if you're a leader and you care about people, this is where you want to be. And let's move forward one more slide. Now, we're a new organization still, but I am so proud of this graphic. This is the work that we did last year. So we're a nonprofit, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, which means most of our income is from donations. And you can see this isn't just a map of donations, it's people that have volunteered, advocated for us. We have partners in these states. We're in about half of the states, Canada, and then we just added a volunteer at the beginning of this year from the UK. So we're officially international, which is pretty cool. The work that you do matters. The culture that you create matters. Who you are matters. If there's anything that I want you to take away from this, is that whether you feel like it or not, you have an impact. Everything you do contributes to, takes away from, or changes the culture. So bear that in mind. Next time you walk into the office, you recruit, hire, you are not useless. Your impact is vast. Thanks so much for having me back, Sam, and for hosting this. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, let's move to the last slide. Thanks to Jenny for dropping a question in the chat. Does anybody else have anything for me? And please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm decently active there. I would be happy to talk to you, make connections for you. I'm still a Kelly, even though I'm an entrepreneur, even if it wasn't intentional.
Hi, Elisa, you mentioned you're in Canada. I'm in Canada. Where in Canada are you?
We have a couple partners. Let's see, we've got one in Ontario, and then we just added somebody else. Oh, I'm gonna blank on it. I'm gonna have to get back to you. There's a couple spots now though. I'm pretty excited about it. That's amazing that you're in Canada.
Yeah, okay. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, please do. Let's chat. I would love to chat further.
Yeah, thank you so much for the
Very
slides
nice.
and the talk. It was impactful.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And Elisa, this is Jenny. I'm actually in Chicago as well. So you guys, you'll go in to speak with all kinds of companies. It's not insurance specific, right?
Right now we're honing our focus there, but I have given talks to conferences outside of insurance, absolutely, because as you know, this transcends an industry. We specifically went into insurance because myself and my co-founders have a background in insurance, but we can talk to more folks outside for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. Could you tell me a little bit more? So you guys, you started with insurance because that's your background. Did you feel like insurance was an area that you really wanted, or an area of concern, or just where you wanted to start?
Both. Both. You hit on it exactly. To give you a little bit more background, the reason this company came into being is because I went through a terrible harassment at work. Now, I had been through more than one, but this one took the cake. Over the pandemic in 2020, I had been on the carrier side of the business and I moved over to the agency side. And within 4 months, I was experiencing sexism and homophobia on broad display. And I thought my life was over. I knew my career was over and I didn't know what to do. I'd already spent the better part of 2 decades in the industry and I was being blocked from entry on multiple points. I was being told I was a liar. It was a really, really awful time. And what changed all of that for me was sitting on a Zoom call with a bunch of other women from the industry. We had no business having anything in common. We came from different backgrounds, different intersections, different geographies. We were different ages, different parts of the industry. And there was one day where somebody goes, Elisa, what's up? And I think any other day, I probably would have brushed past that and said, oh, I'm fine. I'm having a rough day. I don't want to talk about it. But because I had the space to do it, and because it was all women on that Zoom call, I shared. And one by one, immediately after I shared, every single person on that Zoom told their story. And that's what changed everything for me, because I knew in that moment that I was not alone. And then I knew that the impact of what was happening in this industry was even bigger than I could have imagined. Because if you Google harassment statistics, it's not 100%. It is not. And in that room, despite the fact that there were 20 of us that had no business other than being women in insurance having anything in common, we all shared that commonality. And so for us, the impact needed to start with insurance because this industry impacts so many others. Whether you like it or not, you're interacting with insurance almost daily. If you drive a car, if you own a home, if you work somewhere, insurance is touching your life. And so what we wanted to do was shed light on an industry that really needs it, because the employees in this industry, if they know that they deserve better, that means their communities do too, and it impacts their decision making. So we do have a problem broadly in the US, but we wanted to tackle an industry that matters to us because we have the experience and because we know that there's a problem.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. And I don't think there's a woman who could not resonate with something that you just said there.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? That like I know that speaking in this room, that all of us have a story, at least one. And if it's not ours, then it's our mothers or our sisters, or our aunts or our grandmothers. Like we carry those with us. So I appreciate you seeing me in that moment, and I see you too.
Thank you.
I know you mentioned you've been doing surveys for the past 2 years. And while it's rather easy to measure for diversity, how are you measuring success in terms of inclusion? Like, are you depending on people to be self-reporting? Like, how does that measurement look for you and your company?
That's a phenomenal question. I wish more people asked that question because that's not something that we get asked. You're right. While it can be somewhat easy to measure diversity, inclusion is very difficult. And it goes back to that one quote that I highlighted with the Harvard Business Review and how it feels. So a lot of it was in the framing of the questions that we have in that survey. And by the way, like even if you're not in insurance, I encourage you to sign up for a profile because you can actually go in and see the questions that we have. And it's an ongoing thing for us. We're constantly revamping. If any of you have suggestions or a thought, I would love to hear it. But we're pretty happy with where we're at right now. And a lot of those questions are feel-based. And beyond that, even more of those questions are on a pain scale. So you know when you go to the hospital and they're like, where are you on the scale of like really angry red face to really happy green face? Because sometimes that's easier for us to relate to than saying, well, I feel like this pain is biting or maybe it's searing. We can relate to it on a pain scale. And so many of the questions that we have in that survey are on that pain scale. The other thing I would say is it's intentional wording around what inclusion means. So we talked to DEI experts, and it wasn't just like, do you feel like you belong? That's a question that's in there. But we have other pieces in there too that maybe aren't so on the nose. Like, do you feel like you would be retaliated against if you said anything? Do you feel like you're a part of your team? Do you feel like there's favoritism? What are other ways that people can feel included? So it was the wording of the question, it was the emphasis on feel, and it was the intention to use a pain scale rather than rate from 1 to 5, or this is highly likely or not. We really wanted to allow an accessibility of how people relate to feelings or pain. That was a great question. Thank you all for your time tonight too. I really appreciate it. It's really cool to meet other amazing people. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll drop my email in the chat. I am not quick right now, I'll be honest, but I love connecting with folks. And if there's anything I can do for you in your Indiana journey or in your career journey, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to help.
Does anyone have any last questions, remarks? All right. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know this year has just been so crazy for so many people. So the fact that you've taken this time to share your wisdom with us and advice, we really do appreciate it. Thank you for those of you who were able to attend today. Thank you for those who are watching the recording. You know, we always appreciate those who want to participate with our WiB Wednesdays. Yeah, with that, I'm happy to let you all have the rest of the evening, but thank you again.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Have a good night, y'all.
Have a good one.